My name is Sean Riley with the American Conservative Magazine. Thank you all for being here. This first panel will address, the fact that we've seen a number of abuses, as Arthur mentioned, of the various agencies and the intel state over the last few years, ranging from the IRS abusing its powers, you may recall, to the investigation into Donald Trump, and so on and so forth. So in this panel, we're going to take a look at how Congress can use its powers of oversight and investigation to check these abuses. And I'm joined here by three individuals who are eminently qualified to help us answer this question. In the interest of time, since we do have a truncated kind of schedule here, just so we can get as much content in as possible, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and then hand it over to them to go in turn. So immediately to my left here, we have Representative Dan Bishop. Representative Bishop is from North Carolina and was first elected to Congress in 2019. Over the last 3 years, Representative Bishop has seen firsthand from his assignment on the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees the dangers of unchecked bureaucratic action. During the 117th Congress, Representative Bishop was one of 19 Republicans to oppose the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act due to the reckless policies it contained, and he has been a steadfast voice against the federal government's approach to the war in Ukraine. Now preparing to represent the citizens of North Carolina's 8th Congressional District in the 118th Congress, Representative Bishop is set to become a leading voice against abuses by the intelligence agencies and the administrative state. Julie Kelly is the senior editor at American Greatness, a political commentator, and the co-host of Happy Hour podcast with Julie and Liz. Is that correct? Okay. So her essays have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, The Federalist, Forbes, The Hill, and National Review. She is the author of January 6th, How Democrats Used the Capitol Protest to Launch a War on Terror Against the Political Right. Through her tireless journalism and powerful writing, Julie has proven herself to be one of the most potent journalistic voices against the abuses of the intelligence state. And last but not least, Robert Delahunty is a Washington Fellow with the Claremont Institute's Center for the American Way of Life. His research focuses on national security and antitrust law. He was the Lejeune Chair and Professor of Law at the University of St. Thomas School of Law in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Before that, he was a senior executive in the senior executive service at the Office of Legal Counsel in the U.S. Department of Justice. He's also served various other roles, including in the White House Office of Homeland Security, special advisor to the Solicitor of Labor at the U.S. Department of Labor, and special advisor to the Assistant General in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. And he was an associate at Sullivan and Cromwell in the litigating division and has also taught philosophy at Durham University in England and Oriel College, Oxford. Please welcome our guests, and I'll turn it over to Representative Bishop.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks to my co-panelists. It's an honor to be here with both of you guys. Had an opportunity in 3 years to meet a lot of fantastic people who are in the cause of freedom, and that in itself is inspiring. Julie, in particular, I had occasion to work with recently as I prepared for a hearing, and every time we have an opportunity to make additional connections, we strengthen the possibility of restoring freedom, restoring the sound operation of the Department of Justice and FBI, and I'm grateful for all of that. I guess by way of opening, and perhaps in response to the opening remarks that were made, I'm a firm adherent to the notion, the biblical notion, that you give thanks in all circumstances. Look for silver linings. And yes, I've been and continue to be an exponent of the idea that the responsibility of Republicans in a Republican House in the 118th Congress is robust oversight. We obviously need to lay out legislative priorities. We need to pass laws in the House, pass bills in the House that we wish to become law, but we know what the obstacles were that were pretended, even however the election may have come out, and that the Biden administration would still be in place. And unlikely to overcome vetoes, but the power that we clearly would have is the power of oversight. And the abuses are widespread. There's been rhetoric that I fully agree with, that every committee in Congress should be an oversight committee, but no place more significant than the House Judiciary Committee, that Jim Jordan will lead, and it was my main objective at this early point in my career in Congress to get on. And that is a fantastic team of Republicans on that committee. And also, I will say, far more disappointing, frankly, to this point, but the opportunity for new leadership on the House Committee on Homeland Security, which needs to become a real robust oversight committee. We obviously will have the problem that will confront us, I think, very clearly, given that we have a small majority, not all of which is by any means conservative and prepared to move forward on these issues, is will we be able to maintain the resolve that will be required to exercise oversight power in a robust, creative, relentless way. So, that will be the challenge, but I think we need to get to it, and I think there's much to work with. That role will be to expose for the American people in a way we've been unable to do just by firing shots from the peanut gallery. What is at stake, what has gone wrong, what can be done to correct. So with that, and looking forward to talking further, I yield.
Thank you, and thank you. I want to thank Dan Bishop because he has been very helpful in his staff and starting to expose the corruption at DOJ. And Robert too, I just met him. Stellar resume, but no podcast. At the conclusion of what I call the Gretchen Whitmer Fed-napping hoax, which was the entrapment scheme engineered by dozens of FBI supervision agents, undercover agents, and informants to make it look like white supremacist militiamen loyal to Donald Trump tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer before the 2020 election. At the conclusion of that hoax, one of the supervising agents said to one of his FBI informants, one of the lead informants, "Don't let facts get in the way of a good story." That could be the motto of the modern day FBI, especially how it has conducted itself over the past 6 or 7 years. It was very telling to see evidence that that's what the supervising agent said to his informant. What Representative Bishop is saying, is what all of us are a little hopeful and fearful about, is that with the slim majority, Republicans will not stick with their resolve to do what needs to be done with these agencies, specifically the Department of Justice and this FBI. In my opinion, oh gosh, am I talking about it? Oh, I'm sorry. There, can you hear me now? Thanks, Chris Ray. There, I'm sorry. Should I start over? No. Happy hour, right. Whitmer Fed-napping. So let's see, where was I? So is keeping the resolve to do what needs to be done. In my opinion, especially after covering the DOJ and FBI, specifically since the events of January 6th, I feel pretty strongly, as do a lot of people, that the FBI is irredeemably corrupt. It's not salvageable. This is actually borne out in polling that shows the overwhelming majority of Republicans and even majority of independents view the FBI, justifiably so, as the Gestapo, the law enforcement arm of the Democratic Party. That has to change. And so is it salvageable? Look no further than yesterday's testimony by FBI Director Christopher Wray. Representative Bishop was there. Representative Higgins specifically confronted Christopher Wray with this question: were any FBI informants dressed as Trump supporters planted inside the Capitol building before it was breached, before the doors were open on January 6th? Now, that should have been a no-brainer, right? No. Where did you get that crazy idea, Representative Higgins? That should have been the reply, but it was not. On 2 occasions, Christopher Wray refused to answer that question. What we found out at the same time, which some of those of us who have been reporting on January 6th, is the suspicion, evidence, and now more evidence of FBI assets provoking and involved not just in the events of January 6th, months before January 6th, embedding numerous FBI informants in the very same alleged militia groups that the January 6th committee is attempting to tie to Donald Trump to justify what I believe is their pending criminal indictment against Donald Trump. This is extremely dangerous territory, and it is imperative that all of us continue to push House Republicans, even with the slim majority, to do what needs to be done. They didn't do it when they had the Congress, they had the Senate, and the executive branch. But now, what we have is an overwhelming trove of evidence from court motions, especially related to the Whitmer Fednapping hoax, which I covered all of those motions, courageous defense attorneys, 2 federal trials. You want to view into the deep corruption, what the FBI is willing to do, that is the case to look at. Now we have a trove of evidence related to how the FBI acts on behalf of the Democratic Party. The question is, what can all of us do? What can organizations like Claremont, Hillsdale, and all of us can do? Am I out of time already? Yeah. Okay, great. To build public support, and in my opinion, the way to build public support is to go outside of Washington, D.C., hold hearings outside of every single one of the 56 FBI field offices. And you have Americans tell the people what this FBI and DOJ is doing to Trump supporters, is doing to citizens on the right. They will share horrifying stories of pre-dawn raids, armed agents, SWAT vehicles, taking down their property and their families in front of their young children, in front of pointing rifles at elderly women standing in the snow in their nightgowns, hauling these people off to political prisons. Those are the stories the American people need to hear. When Arthur talked about corporate America being on the side of the left, you have banks that are canceling people charged, not convicted, charged with trespassing, misdemeanors related to January 6th. These people have ended up on TSA warning lists, terror lists, where it takes them hours to go through multiple layers of security before they can get on a plane. Trespassers, not even people who assaulted police officers. Those horrifying stories need to be told to the American people, because that's the only way to build public support to support Republicans who are going to be up against the challenge of their political lives, trying to dismantle this agency, reconstruct it, and hold the people accountable, not just on the 7th floor, but the agents like I just talked about, the agents and informants who are operating out of all 56 field offices. So I think if people want to start, how they can support Republicans who want to do this, building public support requires telling these public stories about what the DOJ and FBI has been doing.
Thank you. First of all, let me say this is my launch here, and I am delighted and honored to be part of this program and the work of this center. And I'm particularly honored and delighted to be on the same panel with 2 people I admire so much, who really love the country and its past and its traditions and its freedoms and its institutions. I'm really honored to be here with both of you.
Thank you, Rob.
Let me just say a little bit about myself. I'm retired now, and I live in a safe haven in southern Utah in the desert, where I hope it's going to be hard for them to get me. But in my past lives, I was for about 18 years in the bowels of the federal bureaucracy, in the deep state, in the Justice Department, and then briefly in the Labor Department as well. And for about a year, I was on detail after 9/11 to the White House Office of Homeland Security, which is where I was, in a way, present at the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. So I have some knowledge based on my experience in the government of how the agencies in the deep state work, including the Department of Justice itself, of course, but also the FBI and the DHS. And after leaving the government, I spent about another 18 years teaching mostly constitutional law, but also international law at the University of St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis, which was also another kind of present at the creation moment for me because it was a brand new faith-based law school at the time I went there. Our topic today is vital. What is the Republican Party as a whole and the Republican majority in the House of Representatives to do in the next 2 years? And let me say this. I think the House Republicans have, to use Franklin Roosevelt's term, a rendezvous with destiny. These are going to be extremely critical years, which will shape the course of the Republic for another generation or longer. And our embattled majority is our front line, and it has to hold. It has to show conviction. It has to show street smarts. It has to show moral and political courage. We are counting on you to come through because what is at stake is of surpassing importance, including whether we become a one-party state governed wretchedly and miserably like California, or whether we have a robust two-party democracy with an opposition that is considered lawful and legitimate and whose claim to rule in its turn is unassailable. Nothing less than that is at stake. Now, the tasks of the House of Representatives at any time are, of course, vital, especially in connection with its role in appropriating for the government. But here, I think, at this juncture, there are three tasks, three functions that it will perform that we need today to concentrate on. The first and most important is that of investigation and oversight. And actually, in the run-up to the election, of course, a great deal of investigation, useful, profitable investigation was done by Republicans in the House. Congressman Jordan is one who comes to mind, and in the Senate, Senator Grassley is another. A great deal of very useful information, 1,000 pages of whistleblower testimony in the case of Congressman Jordan, has been unearthed and can be the basis for further investigation of the deep state. The second function that the House can and should perform with its Republican majority is that of blocking. It can block stupid, unnecessary, and vicious legislation, for example, in the national security strategy for dealing with domestic extremism and violence, which the Biden administration published in June of 2021. There is a hint that they will seek expanded legal authority for some of the federal investigative agencies like the FBI. That needs to be blocked. And any such legislative initiatives from the Biden administration of that kind need to be stopped. Also, there is the defunding power, which should be used, I wish I could remember exactly how you put it, Congressman Bishop, robustly, relentlessly, and creatively. The defunding power should be used in all those ways to shut down, zero out federal operations, especially in the case of the intelligence agencies that are aimed at us, that have cast aside any pretense of being objective and fair and law-bound, and that are aimed specifically at conservative and Republican targets. Those, it may take some courage, it may take willingness to bear the heat, but those activities need to be corralled either by substantive legislation or by the simple failure to appropriate or to forbid the use of funds that are appropriated for those kinds of activities. The third thing we can do, and I ask us all not to lose sight of this. We don't control the White House, we don't control the Senate, but we can make affirmative, substantive legislative proposals. We can introduce bills, and fine, they will be blocked in the Senate or at the White House. But nonetheless, we need to showcase what we will do if the country gives us the power in 2024. It is not useless, it is not unavailing. And the power that Congress has to investigate is collateral, is subordinate to its power of lawmaking. Let us not forget that, and let us offer the American people a program of what we aim to do if it gives us the power. If that means, let us say, abolishing the FBI, let us pass a bill in the House to do that. If that means getting rid of certain FBI operations or activities, let us do that. And even though it may be veto bait for the White House, we are on the record as saying this is the fruit of our investigations. This is what we aim to do if we have the power. Now, let me say a few things about the kinds of investigations I hope the House will undertake. Arthur asked me yesterday to say a few things about the Church Committee, which, of course, as you will remember, in the late 1970s, after the Watergate scandals, spent some years in investigating and probing and reforming the intelligence community, notably the FBI, but also other agencies that had been corrupted during the Nixon administration. And we have a situation like that today. But I'm not exactly going to hold up the Church Committee and the House version of that, which was the Pike Committee, as a model, because times are different, and I don't think those models apply exactly. What I would suggest is that we have closer to hand a model not to follow, and we can learn from the flaws of that model. And that, of course, is the January 6th committee. Whatever the House does, it should not create a committee that operates like that committee. In particular, I think we should bear in mind throughout that investigation does not mean having a revenge party, feasting on revenge. I think the American people are rather tired, at least I am, of a politics of revenge and denunciation and exposure. It wants something creative. It wants actually policy. So what I propose for consideration is this. First of all, to be the non-January 6th committee, the new House Investigative Committee should make a genuine, good faith effort at being nonpartisan. It is investigating a matter of national concern to all Americans, how the deep state, the intelligence agencies have come to pose a threat to the freedoms and constitutional rights of all of us. It should keep that in mind. It should not be a partisan exercise in the way the January 6th committee was. And that means giving the House minority all the rights and privileges and powers that normally attend to membership participation in a committee. I think that's very, very important. It could mean actually inviting the Senate, which the other party controls, to set up a counterpart committee to do its own investigation of the deep state and the abuses we have seen during the Trump administration, but also in the first 2 years of Biden. Whether the Senate would respond to that offer, I do not know. But there was a Pike Committee and a Church Committee, and there could well be, and probably should well be, committees in each House that investigate similar topics. Second, to be the non-January 6th committee, the House committee should observe all common standard procedural protections and requirements that are afforded to witnesses, including bringing counsel if they want, and it should be completely a level playing for witnesses and all who testify before the committee. They should have the full panoply of their rights. Third, the committee should make abundant use, as has been done, for example, with Congressman Jordan's 1,000-page document, full use of whistleblowers within the agencies, especially the FBI. And the appeal should be made to these in-house agents that their duty as patriots and their concern with the good name of their agencies require them to step forward. You should appeal to the best in the FBI agents, to what is noblest in them, and urge them to come forward, even at a risk to their careers, to testify and to talk to the American people. Number 4, of course, you will need excellent first-class staff on the committee to do its work. And this is not just a plug for lawyers, but in the past, in the historic past, for example, antitrust investigations before the New Deal, good lawyers made a tremendous difference in the quality of a committee work. And keep that also in mind. Another idea, public hearings. I think Julie Kelly's suggestion of hearings across the country is absolutely brilliant, not just to bring the matter home to the American people, but to invite a sense that we are all in this thing together, we all participate and have an interest in the outcome. Finally, I would hope that the committee would come up at the end with substantive, coherent legislative proposals. The Church Committee considered, it didn't in the end adopt, but it considered having an organic statute for the FBI that was never enacted. Reforms were done administratively instead, like the Levy guidelines. I suggest that the committee should remember that the outcome of its work should be a legislative proposal, and it may be that would take the form of an organic act for the FBI.
All right. All right. Thanks so much for those comments.
It's a Goldilocks thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Too much or too little.
We will turn it over to the audience for some questions in a moment, but did either of you have additional comments you'd like to make?
Julie, did you want to go first and add anything to what you already said?
No, I'll just hear for questions.
I think I'll just use the opportunity to respond to questions and add in whatever I've gotten at that point, if anybody has questions.
Sounds good. We have one.
But I stand ready to talk if need be.
You're our congressman after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. One of the powerful things about Julie's work is she's been telling the stories of what's gone on, and that has an impact. And Congressman, you know from getting elected, you have to talk to people about where they are. It feels to me like as we head into a great debate on policy, the American people need stories, the narratives of what's happened. And we have a very difficult time fighting through the mainstream media and big tech. Witness the coverage of, I'm sure Director Wray testified yesterday because it was after the midterm elections, right? Because the narrative has to be swallowed up by whether Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell are best friends or not. So I'm not sure what happened. There you go. The NSA. Oh, there we go.
They're adjusting.
So that my question is, how do you expect to get past that? Because great debates on policy are really interesting, but the narrative the people are hearing is really broken. Much of the country thinks the January 6th people were organized to take over the country. They really do. And Julie fights hard to take it back, but Julie's one voice, and I think we have a problem that oversight on policy will not cover if we haven't a significant effort to change the narrative. It's almost beyond a challenge we can comprehend.
I think that's right. If I may go first, I would say that I think the challenge is for members to recognize, first, it's sort of a humble approach. That is, I had an occasion to attempt to draw out Matt Olson, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security Division, with a quick sort of rendition of what the Whitmer kidnapping plot appears to be. I actually did a really terrible job of it, but it got a tremendous amount of exposure because I got the core of it from Julie's work, all of it from Julie's work. I really did a bad job of rendering it and asking the question. If I had done it just but you've got 5 minutes to work with. It goes in an instant. And so I think what you got to recognize is how dependent every one of us are and all of our staffs are on good input from folks out there. There's a person in this room today who's a businessman actually they've changed my district around, but from my district. I didn't know he was going to be here. He has an important and thriving business. He doesn't have time arguably to deal with this sort of stuff, but I've received constant input from him by text. I'm not going to out him in front of everybody because he might not want to be. But I think that's an invaluable source of stuff. Sometimes I can't respond to it. It's kind of like the print buffer on the old dot matrix printers for old people who are old enough. If it just got too much information, came in too fast, the document would just end without all of it. So that happens to me, and I think some people over the course of time may take offense at that, but I mean it. I don't think we can do these stories unless we get the input from the people. And our tool the deep state has all of the resources in the world drawn from the American taxpayer. We've got to rely on the resilience and resourcefulness of the American people. So I think that's it. Julie tells fantastic stories. I think about the story of, is it Matt Houck? Is that his name? The pro-life protester who, the SWAT team burst into his home at gunpoint with 7 children, and depicting that. I only have a little glimpse of what that was like. I need to learn more about that. Somebody's got to provide that to me so that I can then use it somehow. One tool that will become, and this is a little bit of a jarring leap perhaps from what I was just saying, but one tool that I think will be, it makes apparent how much we, we don't have a massive majority that's going to be, hell-bent on, are we going to do a select committee, a church committee? Are we sure we're going to be able to sell that? Are we going to be able to enforce our subpoenas? I don't know that the small majority will do that. But even just getting past that 5-minute limit, asking questions to Mayorkas. I asked Mayorkas yesterday if he maintains the border still secure. I thought it was important to do that. I had time for like one more question of Ray, and it didn't really get anywhere. Somebody from the Democratic side asked him what he needs. Here's what Ray said in response to that. Chris Ray said the FBI needs. He says, well, he wanted to emphasize how great the 38,000 who work for the FBI are. And to be sure, I think many of those folks are absolutely great. But he lauded that. And then he said, the only other thing he said was, we need to renew our 702 authority, our FISA authority. They've done nothing, not one thing. And by the way, it's important to say too, it isn't just the FBI. It's the DOJ. Mm-hmm. It's as much the DOJ, maybe more the DOJ, where the policy people are, that sort of always gets a free pass, and we focus on the FBI and say it's fundamentally corrupt. They have a tremendous burden of proof to come to Congress to say that their authorities should be renewed under FISA. And they've not even undertaken it a bit. They act as if there's no question. Maybe one enormous change is we're going to start on the 1st of December, even before the next Congress, having an interview under oath with a former FBI high-ranking official. That is a tremendous change. I get to get questions answered, not only in 5-minute snippets, but at length. And Robert, I think what you said is exactly right. The temptations being what they are, this small majority will probably discipline us to proceed in an appropriate way. After the Trump raid, we put out a tweet that said we need to smash the FBI into 1 million pieces. I regret the tweet. I actually don't believe, as I sit here, that we can abolish the FBI unless we do something to replace it. I mean, it does have an extraordinarily important law enforcement function, but I don't doubt that it needs to be fundamentally changed, and it has gone way off the rails. So I think learning and using every tool at our disposal, proceeding in a humble way, receiving input from all those who are out there, making connections as fast as we can go to get new stories. That's how we do it. And then you build careful reform ideas, Robert. I think you're right. Decentralizing part of it. You actually made reference to some things that came out of the church committee. I don't even know in detail. I've read a book about church committee. So yeah, we've got it. We're going to have to work really hard. It is not going to be easy, and we're not going to be proceed from now we got the power, we're going to get them. Those are my random thoughts. Julie?
We only got a couple of minutes left, so
Okay.
go ahead. I mean, go ahead if you have something to say. But
No, I just wanted to support what Dan was saying. I also want to dovetail with what Robert was saying in terms of the power of the purse. The most dangerous man in Washington, D.C. in the country is a man named Matthew Graves. He's the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, a Biden campaign advisor. His wife runs a very radical left-wing nonprofit in Washington, D.C. He is the one that has accelerated this prosecution of January 6ers. Think about this. Yesterday, the FBI arrested 3 people. More than 22 months later, 3 people on trespassing misdemeanors. This is not ending. They're trying to round up thousands of these Trump supporters, destroying their lives. Those are the stories that need to be told. And we can push Republican House members all that we want, and we can criticize them. But if we don't step up and help them offer some sort of infrastructure to tell these public stories and build public support, then we really only have ourselves to blame.
Very briefly, David beat Goliath. That's good. We have the strength of thousands. We should not overestimate the power of the opposition, even though it does control the media and therefore the narrative. We should not underestimate our own power because we have tremendous people in Congress and we have tremendous assets like Julie in the media, and we need to support them. I think one way to try to seize control of the narrative is to offer substantive policy changes. They should not be insane. This is not a kamikaze effort. Much as I sympathize with the idea of abolishing the FBI, I think it's unrealistic and the problem will just recur in another form, but we could showcase reforms of the FBI, for example, decapitating their domestic intelligence activities and either creating a new agency to do that or distributing it to other entities in our governments, including local police. We should have cogent, thought-out reform proposals that will attract attention. I do think the American people are starving for good policy, and this is a way we could break the hold that the other side has on the narrative.
All right, join me in thanking our panelists. Stick around.